I feel like the voice of the younger generation in this election is so critical.
They tried to shoot him, and he comes up ready to fight.
She's looking to implement a more inclusive culture in America.
I really feel he will make America great again.
All those voices can only mean one thing. It's Election Day. After a tumultuous campaign unlike any other, the United States is in the process of choosing its next president. Tens of millions have already cast their ballots, and as polls open fully across the US, that choice is on a knife edge.
And tonight, or in the days to come, we'll know which vision of America prevailed in this bitterly divided political moment. But what kind of country will Joe Biden's successor inherit? And how long will those election results take, really?
It's Tuesday, November 5th. This is Reuters World News, bringing you everything you need to know from the front lines in 10 minutes every weekday. I'm Tara Oakes in Washington, D.C.
And I'm Jonah Green in New York.
Both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris sprinted across swing states in the last frantic day of the campaign.
We're ready to get out the vote. We're ready to win.
We are going to fire Kamala and we're going to save America.
And while the candidates made their last-ditch appeals to voters, a midnight split in the Northeast.
I think New Hampshire's a purple state, and I think it's very divided, and I think even the six of us might be divided.
And Anne-Marie Pintle was right, a tie in Dixville Notch. The town's 6 registered voters cast the first Election Day votes at midnight, in a tradition which goes back 60 years. And this year saw 3 votes cast for Harris and 3 for Trump. So, like the inhabitants of Dixville Notch, you've cast your vote, you're kicking back and following the election on, of course, Reuters.com and the Reuters app. But it might be a bit of a wait. Results could take a few days.
Political reporter Joseph Axe is here to fill us in on what to expect once polls close. So, Joey, last time we were primed to expect an Election Day red mirage, right? Because Republicans voted the day of, and Democrats tended to vote more by mail or early. Is that still the case, or have voting patterns changed since the pandemic?
So it's hard to say on a national level, because obviously every state has its own laws on how it handles and counts ballots. And so if you take Pennsylvania, election officials are barred from touching any mail ballots until the day of the election. And so as the polls close that evening, Pennsylvania will start reporting votes, and the in-person election day results, which are likely to favor Trump, will come in much more quickly than the mail ballots, which just take a lot longer to process. And so it's going to look as though Trump's winning, at least initially, but then as those ballots get counted from the mail, they're likely to favor Harris, and she's probably going to cut into that gap.
But Republicans are voting early and by mail much more this year, right? So how should we read that?
One of the things that's been hard to figure out is whether all of those Republican voters that are going early in person are those voters that would have voted anyway on Election Day and have simply chosen to vote earlier, or does the higher number of Republican voters who are voting early, does that reflect more enthusiasm and a bigger turnout among Republican voters?
So we've established Pennsylvania might be a bit of a slog. What about the other battleground states?
So North Carolina, Arizona, Georgia, those are all states that allow the election officials to process the mail ballots more quickly. They're states where you may see Harris with an early lead, because those states, at least in the initial hours, tend to be reporting mail-in ballots, early ballots that are likely to favor Democrats. And it's only after that that you may see a red shift where Trump may start to cut into those leads.
If the polls are way off and it's not as close as they suggest, then it's likely we'll know the results sooner than later, right? But what if it is as close as they suggest?
In 2020, the election was called for Biden on Saturday after Election Day. What people don't remember necessarily is there were still a number of swing states that hadn't been called at that point. And so if we get into a situation this year where it really is coming down to one of those states, you could be in for a much longer wait than 2020.
Concerns about potential political violence have prompted officials across the country to bolster security during and after Election Day. Here's Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner with a warning to would-be troublemakers.
Anybody who thinks it's time to play militia, F around and find out. We do have the cuffs, we do have the jail cells, we do have the Philly juries.
Here in D.C., the fortifications are hard to miss. Even a McDonald's has been boarded up with wooden shields as the city gears up for possible turmoil. I've just walked basically the entire perimeter of about as close as you can get to the White House, and the whole thing is ringed with these metal fences which have been set up. There's also construction already for the inaugural parade for next year, 2025. But right now, a lot of the tourists around me are struggling to get their iconic picture of the White House through all the gates and fences set up in front of them. And it's not just heightened security souring the mood for many Americans.
Polls find that voters believe the U.S. is on the wrong track. Take the economy, for example. Despite its growth, Biden could go down in history as presiding over the best economy that everyone hated.
And overseas conflicts have overshadowed his presidency. What kind of country will the next president inherit?
Suzanne Goldenberg is our global enterprise editor. Suzanne, I want to start with something that President Trump likes to repeat often on the campaign trail.
But now we're a nation in decline. We are a failing nation.
So is he right?
No. I mean, if you were to look at the economy, America's economy is the envy of the industrialized world. The U.S. has emerged from COVID with really strong job growth, wage increases. Of course, the problem for many Americans is that those increases were offset by huge spikes when we came out of the pandemic in things like groceries, rent, insurance. And so that's contributed to the sort of discontent many are feeling and that Trump has tapped into.
Okay, so that's what's going well. But what crises might fall into the lap of Biden's successor?
Every president is guaranteed to face events that change the course of their time in the White House. For Biden especially, that was when the Supreme Court overturned the right to abortion, and it was also foreign policy. In terms of immigration, yes, we saw record levels of illegal migration in 2022 and in 2023. But since June this year, that situation has turned around. I mean, that is one thing that's guaranteed in the White House is that there will be some kind of surprise that puts a presidency in a different direction than perhaps the elected leader anticipated.
And if you're interested in the economic legacy of Biden, then we've got a whole Econ World podcast on just that, Bidenomics. We'll put a link in today's pod description. And later on today, we'll have a new episode out all about interest rates, just in case you want a bit of a break from the election. And now, everyone, breathe. Or go for a walk. Or step away from social media, just for a little while. Whatever it takes to reduce election stress, because we've found it's significant. In recent days, Reuters correspondents have spoken to more than 50 voters across the 7 competitive states that will determine the next president. They've encountered an electorate on edge. Here's how some of them are coping.
Lots of sleep and quiet time out in nature, working out, vigorous working out, long walks, meditation.
That's Dr. Curtis Jasper, a psychologist in Atlanta, Georgia. James Lang, a Las Vegas resident, agrees on the meditation front.
Meditation and prayer and, breathing and the things of this class, will help me kind of just calm down and go into the pools and make my selections.
Speaking to us from a yoga class. But in Scottsdale, Arizona, Lyft driver Jillian Marshall had some different advice.
What I've been doing is I've been unfollowing a lot of people on Twitter, a lot of political accounts. I do have children, and I have a cat, and I will be watching with my Xanax and my bottle of Sauvignon Blanc.
Before we leave you on this election day, penny candy, nickel cigars, dime stores, and 25-cent movie tickets. We look at prices and inflation in the US, how debates about both often seem frozen in time, and how surging inflation over the last 3 years, to levels not seen since the early 1980s, is a ballot box issue. That's our recommended read for today, and there's a link to the graphic and the story in the pod description.
For more on any of the stories from today, check out Reuters.com or the Reuters app. To never miss an episode, subscribe on your favorite podcast player. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest on the election in our daily headline show.